are emerging. Activity in a specific area of the brain can predict if a patient with depression will do better with an antidepressant or talk therapy. People with schizophrenia have less brain tissue in the earliest stages of the illness. Low levels of oxytocin, a hormone linked to social behavior, have been linked to higher levels of anxiety. With each new discovery, however, comes the daunting reality that there is so much more to learn. The human brain is infinitely complex and unpredictable. A breathtaking massive tissue comprising some 100 billion neurons and immeasurable capacity. That one organ can power our most basic needs, breathing, eating, walking, foster our intellect, and preside over random thoughts and amorphous feelings, is as impossible to fathom as the breadth of the universe. Doctors know far more about the mechanisms underlying heart disease or diabetes than they do about mental disorders. And diagnostic tools are more precise for most physical ailments. X-rays pick up bone breaks. Thermometers measure fever. Blood tests detect infection. The brain is different. While you can image it for tumors and blood clots, you cannot scan it for bipolar or borderline personality disorders. And even if you could, would you be able to see these conditions with any clarity? Symptoms crisscross and overlap. Boundaries blur. Depression and anxiety often coexist with each other and with other conditions, including addiction, autism, and eating disorders. The notion that mental disorders are distinct entities has begun to change. Researchers recently discovered, for example, that a group of the same genetic variations is associated with 5 seemingly different conditions: autism, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, bipolar disorder, depression, and schizophrenia. A mental health assessment is subjective, based largely on what a patient's symptoms look like and what he or she tells the doctor. For now, the best that clinicians can do is to compare this against descriptive information and a checklist of symptoms contained in the American Psychiatric Association's 947-page reference book called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or DSM. Although it serves a vital purpose in guiding mental health professionals toward diagnoses and treatment, the diagnostic manual has long been controversial. Critics charge that the diagnostic criteria lack validation and are overly inclusive. Since it debuted in 1952, the number of distinct mental disorders has increased from 80 to 157 in the 5th and most recent edition of the DSM, known as the DSM-5, published in 2013. With each new condition comes the possibility that an otherwise healthy person with run-of-the-mill quirks will be given a diagnosis and a medication he or she doesn't need. Is your headache a symptom of caffeine withdrawal, one of the new diagnostic categories, or just punishment for too many lattes? If you gorge on French fries, do you have a binge eating disorder? Or is it the old eyes bigger than your stomach problem? Despite these valid concerns, the DSM is the standard reference guide relied on by most mental health professionals today. And I used it as a framework to understand the symptoms and behaviors of the figures I've profiled here. To unveil the details of their experiences and their struggles, I mined published medical reports, biographies, autobiographies, and, when available, letters and diaries. For historical and contemporary views about mental health generally, and about the specific conditions I profiled, I consulted numerous books and journal articles and interviewed professionals with a range of expertise, including neuroscientists, psychiatrists, psychoanalysts, clinical psychologists, and academic researchers. My goal in presenting these portraits was not to assign labels, but to contextualize mental health characteristics using both historical and